August 16th, 1924. The sun hung low behind thick gray clouds as Silas Greaves stepped off the rusted train at the Wickford station. The platform groaned beneath his boots, a worn vestige of a town long past its best years. Dilapidated buildings leaned with neglect, weather-beaten slats shedding flakes of white paint, like unheeded warnings. Fog drifted in from the sea, mixing with the scent of mildew and rust. Silas was no ordinary drifter. Beneath his threadbare coat and road-bitten exterior lay a curious mind sharpened by half-finished university degrees and long nights combing forbidden archives. Greed for knowledge, knowledge not meant for men with steady hands and sound minds, had led him across states, into broken churches and shuttered libraries. Now it had brought him to Wickford. The rumors had been too tempting. Strange lights above the old asylum hillside, distant voices echoing under the soil, animals fleeing from invisible forces. Fishermen refused to cast near Wickford's wharf after sundown. A child had vanished near Red Creek Ravine without a trace. In the stale back room of the Wayward Sailor Inn, an old man leaned forward over a cracked table to whisper between his gums, "Ain't right. What's under us? No quiet in this town, not even underground." "What do you mean, under?" Silas asked, pencil already moving across a battered notebook. "The old ward, the asylum. Heard they kept expanding it. Below. Got greedy, like it was hiding something. Now there's this tunneling." His eyes glazed. "There are sounds. Sounds like crying stone." The Wickford Asylum, set on a wind-scoured rise north of town, had been partially condemned for 2 decades now. Official records said subsidence made parts unfit. But Silas found something different in the records office. Buried funding approvals and blueprints marred with ink stains and curious symbols drawn in the margins. There had been a significant subterranean expansion ordered in 1898, directed by one Dr. Elwood Farnham. The blueprints showed downward chutes, dual staircases spiraling beyond the mapped layers, and rooms marked only with a nameless sigil. Locals paled when the asylum was mentioned. Construction crews either refused to speak or couldn't remember what they'd built beneath it. Rumors in the pub spoke of late-night howls muffled beneath the floorboards, and children lying awake listening to murmurs that rose like flickering heat from the cellar stones. Drawn by whispers and driven by something deeper than curiosity, a hunger for understanding the fabric behind sanity, Silas found himself wandering closer to the asylum gates each evening. The guards no longer bothered to keep watch, and the trees around the grounds were visibly dying, leaves yellowing even in summer. Some nights he thought he saw flickers of movement in the cracked upper windows, shadowy shapes not quite human. One evening, as twilight thickened into oily dusk, he stood before the rust-eaten gates. A coil of wind rolled down from nowhere, carrying with it a low, scraping sound that seemed to rise from the soil beneath his boots. Silas Greaves smiled. He had come for forbidden knowledge, and something, it seemed, was ready to share it. Silas Greaves hadn't expected the asylum to be quite so alive. Not in the usual sense, of course. The wing he broke into had long ago been shuttered, its halls mildew-slick and congested with the scent of rot. Moonlight bled through fractured windows, casting jagged shadows across a place forgotten, but only by men. Something else remembered. The door to what had likely been a patient cell was blocked by a decaying cabinet collapsed in on itself. Silas shouldered it aside, coughing as puffs of ancient dust billowed around him. Inside, amid scattered bedding and claw-marked walls, he found it. a leather-bound volume, cracked from age and neglect. Scrawled on the front in flaking ink was a single phrase, "Journal of the Mad." He thumbed through its brittle pages beneath the flicker of his oil lamp. The writing began coherently enough. Entries from a patient named Elijah Dorrance, committed in 1892 for incoherent ramblings and haltless screaming at starlight. But the entries disintegrated into frantic scribbles, symbols Silas couldn't decipher, and lines that dripped downward unnaturally, as if gravity had warped on parchment. Over and over, the name Azathoth appeared, as did references to the sibilant choir of the stars, and something he called the eye in the rift. One entry stood apart in chilling simplicity. "If the sky breaks again, the song begins anew." From the moment he read that line, Silas began to hear the whispers. At first it was faint, as if leaves blew patterns into his ears as he slept back at the rented boarding room. He told himself it was wind or his own overburdened thoughts, too many ghost stories and stale air. But in truth, it was neither. The whispers grew in tone and texture. They spoke no language known to him, yet their meaning curled unbidden in his mind. They told him of shapes writhing past stars and music played by tongues that had never known flesh. Every time he tried to set the journal down, a low throb would pulse behind his eyes, demanding return. Witnesses of the strange sky over Wickford, the few who ventured out past dusk, spoke in hushed tones of an inexplicable glow forming above the deserted asylum building. Sharp as broken glass, fractures of pale green light laced the heavens like veins beneath the skin of the world. Silas saw them too. The journal grew colder in his hands whenever the fractures pulsed, almost reacting. Sleep eluded him. The border between dream and waking thinned until Silas no longer trusted minutes to stay still. Streets slumped into unfamiliar angles. People's faces twitched with inhuman jerks when seen from the corners of his eyes. He began avoiding others altogether, fearing what might speak through their mouths. Despite his unraveling mind, obsession overtook fear. The journal hinted at something subterranean, maps etched into its final pages with distortions in topography and geometry. Not simply tunnels, but a descent. A road for gods. Standing once more before the iron gates of the asylum, the stars above twisting and muttering behind the rift, Silas knew his path would soon take him below, deeper than earth, deeper than madness, to where the song of Azathoth awaited a final verse. The chill of the descending staircase gripped Silas Greaves like a vice. The flickering lantern in his hand cast manic shadows against ancient stone walls as he stepped into the asylum's forgotten depths. The journal's newest translated passage, a tangle of glyphs and maddened English, had spoken of an opening below, older than the asylum itself, where the breath of the blind idiot god moistens the root of the world. His mind reeled with fragments of dreams not his own, but the path was clear. He could no longer resist. The air thickened with each step. Beneath the lowest sublevel, Silas pried open a rusted iron grate and dropped into a narrow earthen tunnel. The walls pulsed faintly, as if exhaling. The whispers had grown stronger, not merely in his mind, but surrounding him, pressing in with maddening familiarity. They chanted no language he could name, yet he understood. He had been expected. He stepped into a cavern vast and black, a cyclopean hall lost beneath Wickford. Impossible geometry flexed the eye, columns that bent toward the cavern floor, shadows cast in directions light didn't touch. His feeble lantern sputtered but held as he approached a crude altar at the chamber's center. There, carved from stone slick with condensation, stood the altar, marked by symbols he'd only half deciphered in the journal. It exuded an aura of impossible age. Space around it seemed to warp, receding and doubling in on itself. Time dithered like a candle flame. Seconds folded into years, then collapsed. The whispering crescendoed into sibilant hymns, and Silas fell to his knees, clutching the journal. Above, beyond miles of rock and ruin, the sky erupted. A sudden warping boom reverberated through the earth as townsfolk screamed above. Silas staggered backward, blinking as a crack like a wound in cosmic flesh split the air above the altar. A void pulsed within, black beyond black, entrancing, hateful. Blasphemous lights spilled from it, coiling into tendrils of soundless discordance. Azathoth's chaotic breath permeated the subterranean chamber. Silas felt the journal heat in his hands. It pulsed to some alien rhythm, staining his skin with glyphs even as he tried to drop it. It clung to him, tendrils of thought wrapping tighter. Images of stars bleeding into one another, of monstrous truths born in the worship of unknowing, filled his mind. The journal was not a relic. It was a gate. Sanity frayed. Stone cracked. The altar shimmered and moved as if breathing. Tears of light opened in the grounds above Wickford's troubled asylum. Cries of madness echoed down the shafts. The town had begun to unravel. Silas clutched his temple and screamed through clenched teeth. Down here, time danced by Azathoth's rules. He knew now this could not be stopped, but perhaps it could be delayed. The ground beneath Silas Greaves split, as if recoiling from unseen truths. From the ruptured skies above the asylum bled sickly hues not meant for earth, colors that flickered and writhed, refusing to anchor to any known spectrum. Tendrils of chitinous blackness slithered down from the cosmic rift, weaving between planes of reality like interstitial maggots. The temple of earth that had once stood solidly beneath Wickford's soil now vibrated, no, pulsed, with something more ancient than the stars. Silas clutched the journal of the mad to his chest, the script upon its pages warping, ink swirling as though in ecstasy at the growing entropy. He had tried, truly tried, to destroy it. Firelicks hissed and recoiled from its surface. Sharp tools had bent, dulled, or simply dissolved. Even water shifted away from the thing, unwilling to touch it, as though it recognized the script as sacred or accursed. Azathoth, Silas whispered, lips bleeding from they know not what pressure. The name now throbbed in his blood, chanted in every heartbeat. He knew then the journal was no chronicle, no man-made tome. It was a keystone, a focal wound through which the mad lord of all chaos peered, or perhaps dreamed. And Silas, the foolish drifter, had been both gatekeeper and key. Above, the asylum collapsed inward, its crumbling brick and shrieking inhabitants swallowed into a vortex not of wind, but of unlogic, where space rerouted and time unfurled like a shredded map. Screaming fractured in echo and timber, no longer belonging to single throats. The town of Wickford itself shimmered, unhooked from history. Roads melted into rivers of wet stone. Church bells rang back-sworn hymns in reverse. Still Silas stood, the last man lucid in a town scoured by insanity. With a final hoarse breath, he leapt toward the hungering rift, journal in hand. Not in surrender, but in fury. At the unfeeling cosmos, at his own wretched hunger for truth. He tumbled end over end into writhing multiplicities. Behind him, the vortex began to fold, retreating like a lid over some cosmic eye drowsing shut. Wickford fell silent. Authorities arrived weeks later, called by rumors and waves of static coming from forgotten transmitters. They found nothing. No asylum, no streets. Only a scrubbed patchwork of forest and rock where once a town had stood. Wickford was struck from all maps, and inquiries terminated by federal agents, though even they refused to camp long in the region. Locals now speak of the place in murmurs, pointing overhead when asked, toward invisible seams in the sky where sound sometimes leaks on still, windless nights, whispers that peel into the skull like frost. And occasionally, in remote libraries or second-hand shops, a curious and unmarked volume will appear, its text ever-shifting, unreadable by sane minds yet irresistibly hypnotic to some. Those who read too deeply often vanish, and in quiet dreams across the world, a name, forgotten, forbidden, laps like tide against the shores of the mind. Azathoth.